One is Not Born a Woman by Monique Witting. A materialist feminist approach to women's oppression destroys the idea that women are a natural group, a racial group of a special kind, a group perceived as natural, a group of men considered as materially specific in their bodies. What the analysis accomplishes on the level of ideas, practice makes actual at the level of facts. By its very existence, lesbian society destroys the artificial, meaning social, fact constituting women as a natural group. A lesbian society pragmatically reveals that the division from men of which women have been the object is a political one, and shows that we have been ideologically rebuilt into a natural group. In the case of women, ideology goes far, since our bodies as well as our minds are the product of this manipulation. We have been compelled in our bodies and in our minds to correspond feature by feature with the idea of nature that has been established for us, distorted to such an extent that our deformed body is what they call natural, what is supposed to exist as such before oppression, distorted to such an extent that in the end oppression seems to be a consequence of this nature within ourselves, a nature which is only an idea. What a materialist analysis does by reasoning, a lesbian society accomplishes practically. Not only is there no natural group, women, we lesbians are living proof of it, but as individuals as well, we question woman, which for us, as for Simone de Beauvoir, is only a myth. She said, one is not born a woman, but becomes a woman. No biological, psychological, or economic fate determines the figure that the human female presents in society. It is civilization as a whole that produces this creature, intermediate between male and eunuch, which is described as feminine. However, most of the feminists and lesbian feminists in America and elsewhere still believe that the basis of women's oppression is biological as well as historical. Some of them even claim to find their sources in Simone de Beauvoir. The belief in mother right and in prehistory when woman created civilization because of a biological predisposition, while the coarse and brutal men hunted because of a biological predisposition, is symmetrical with the biologizing interpretation of history produced up to now by the class of men. It is still the same method of finding in women and men a biological explanation of their division outside of social facts. For me, this could never constitute a lesbian approach to women's oppression, since it assumes that the basis of society or the beginning of society lies in heterosexuality. Matriarchy is no less heterosexual than patriarchy. It is only the sex of the oppressor that changes. Furthermore, not only is this conception still imprisoned in the categories of sex, woman and man, but holds on to the idea that the capacity to give birth, biology, is what defines a woman. Although practical facts and ways of living contradict this theory in lesbian society, there are lesbians who affirm that women and men are different species or races. The words are used interchangeably. Men are biologically inferior to women. Male violence is a biological inevitability. By doing this, by admitting that there is a natural division between women and men, we naturalize history. We assume that men and women have always existed and will always exist. Not only do we naturalize history, but also, consequently, we naturalize the social phenomena which express our oppression, making change impossible. For example, instead of seeing birth as a forced projection, we see it as a natural biological process, forgetting that in our societies births are planned, demography, and forgetting that we ourselves are programmed to produce children. While this is the only social activity short of war that presents such a great danger of death, Thus, as long as we will be unable to abandon by will or impulse a lifelong, centuries old commitment to childbearing as the female creative act, gaining control of the production of children will mean more than mere control of the material means of this production. Women will have to abstract themselves from the definition woman, which is imposed upon them. A materialist feminist approach shows that we take for the cause or the origin of oppression is in fact only the mark imposed by the oppressor, the myth of woman, plus its material effects and manifestations in the appropriated consciousness and bodies of women. Thus, this mark does not predate oppression. Colette Gauman has shown that before the socioeconomic reality of black slavery, the concept of race did not exist, at least not in its modern meaning, since it was applied to the lineage of families. However, now race, exactly like sex, is taken as an immediate given, a sensible given, physical features belonging to a natural order. But what we believe to be a physical and direct perception is only a sophisticated and mythic construction, an imaginary formation, which reinterprets physical features in themselves as neutral as any others, but marked by the social system through the network of relationships in which they are perceived. They are seen as black, therefore they are black. They are seen as woman, therefore they are woman. But before being seen that way, they first had to be made that way. Lesbians should always remember and acknowledge how unnatural, compelling, totally oppressive, and destruction being woman was for us in the old days before the women's liberation movement. It was a political constraint, and those who resisted it were accused of not being real women. But then we were proud of it, since in the accusation there was already something like a shadow of victory. The avowal by the oppressor that woman is not something that goes without saying, since to be one has to be a real one. We were at the same time accused of wanting to be men. Today, this double accusation has been taken up again with enthusiasm in the context of the women's liberation movement by some feminists and also, alas, by some lesbians whose political goal seems to somehow be becoming more and more feminine. To refuse to be a woman, however, does not mean that one has to become a man. Besides, if we take as an example the perfect butch, the classic example which provokes the most horror, whom Proust would have called a woman man, how is her alienation different from someone who wants to become a woman? Tweedledum and Tweedledee. At least for a woman, wanting to become a man proves that she has escaped her initial programming. But even if she would like to, with all her strength, she cannot become a man. For becoming a man would demand from a woman not only a man's external appearance, but his consciousness as well. That is, the consciousness of one who disposes by right of at least 2 natural slaves during his lifespan. This is impossible, and one feature of lesbian oppression consists precisely of making women out of reach for us, since women belong to men. Thus, a lesbian has to be something else, not a woman, a not woman, a not man, a product of society, not a product of nature, for there is no nature in society. The refusal to become or to remain heterosexual always meant to refuse to become a man or a woman, consciously or not. For a lesbian, this goes further than the refusal of the role woman. It is the refusal of the economic, ideological, and political power of a man. This, we lesbians, and non-lesbians as well, knew before the beginning of the lesbian and feminist movement. However, as Andrea Dworkin emphasizes, many lesbians recently have increasingly tried to transform the very ideology that has enslaved us into a dynamic, religious, and psychologically compelling celebration of female biological potential. Thus, some avenues of the feminist and lesbian movement lead us back to the myth of woman, which was created by men, especially for us. And with it, we sink back into a natural group. Having stood up to fight for a sexist society, we now find ourselves entrapped in the formal deadlock of woman is wonderful. Simone de Beauvoir underlined particularly the false consciousness which consists of selecting among the features of the myth that women are different from men, those which look good and using them as a definition for woman. What the concept woman is wonderful accomplishes is that it retains for defining woman the best features, best according to whom, which oppression has granted us. It is not, and it does not radically question the categories, man and woman, which are political categories and not natural givens. It puts us in the position of fighting within the class woman, not as the other classes do, but for the disappearance of our class. Not as other classes do for the disappearance of our class, but for the defense of woman and its reinforcement. It leads us to develop with complacency new theories about our specificity. Thus, we call our passivity nonviolence, when the main and emergent point for us is to fight our passivity, our fear, rather a justified one. The ambiguity of the term feminist sums up the whole situation. What does feminist mean? Feminist is formed from the word femme, woman, and means someone who fights for woman. For many, it is someone who fights for woman as a class and for the disappearance of this class. For many others, it means for someone who fights for woman and her defense, for the myth, then, and its reinforcement. But why was the word feminist chosen if it retains the least ambiguity? We choose to call ourselves feminists 10 years ago, not in order to support or reinforce the myth of woman, nor to identify ourselves with the oppressor's definition of us, but rather to affirm that our movement had a history and to emphasize the political link with the old feminist movement.